It's Monday, September 11th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show presented by NerdWallet. It's a hell of a day to talk ball, man, because it is the aftermath of week one. I am joined to do just all that with the one and only Scott Pianowski here very late, 11:23 p.m. Eastern time zone. Scott, I'm still adjusting to the Eastern time zone. We had a fantastic day of football capped off by I don't I don't even know what to say about that Sunday night performance, man.
Sure. Well, I was thinking all day, who can keep up with Tyreek Hill, man? 39 points against the Chargers. Who can run with Tyreek Hill? Obviously, the Dallas defense. Your final score, Tyreek Hill, fantasy's leading scorer on Sunday with 39 points. The Dallas defense in Yahoo standards scoring 37 points. They tried. I guess they call off the dogs late. And I was telling you and producer Colin, a big Cowboys fan, he'll enjoy all of this talk. My good friend, Mike Perillo, college friend, my best friend from college, calls me a month ago, keeper league. It's kind of hybrid scoring. He goes, I know this is crazy, but I can keep George Pickens with the Dallas defense. And the defensive scoring in this league is really screwball. They score a lot of points. And so I said to him, well, do people hoard defenses? Do people keep defenses? He goes, no, they still kind of ignore them. They treat them like most fantasy people do. Yeah, whatever. I'll get to a defense when I get to it. I'll stream them. I'll pick them up. I'll throw them away. And we had a conversation of 20 minutes, Pickens versus the Dallas defense. And we both came to the conclusion that as crazy as it sounded, because you would never do this in most traditional leagues, we thought the Dallas defense was the right play, but I'm not sure if he pulled the trigger or not. Now, what did Pickens get? Like 35 yards today or something? Totally forgettable game. Dallas is.
I was going to say you mentioned that right now the Dallas defense. Obviously we've got Monday Night Football left to go, but they're the second highest scoring player quote unquote of week one. Let me tell you what, you got to scroll a long way down to 134th before you get to George Pickens.
Great. So, Mike, if you're out there, man, I hope you did the right thing. I hope you read between the lines and you realize what I was saying was keep the Dallas defense. The good news for the Giants fans, right? You just got embarrassed. You got eviscerated. You got crushed. You're playing the Arizona Cardinals in week 2. So I don't think you need to radically change any of your Giants stances. They just wrong team, wrong matchup. They haven't played well against the Cowboys for the last couple of years. I'm still bullish on Daniel Jones. I still think Darren Waller is going to be the de facto number one receiver here and should be a top 5 tight end. It was a horrible tight end day for just about every tight end anyway. But football, it's important to remember you're not as good as you are on your best days and you're not as lousy as you are on your worst days, and things kind of percolate back to the middle and regress back to the middle. So I'm not going to do anything crazy about my Giants. They just, about the Giants that I roster, they're not my Giants. But, if you like Daniel Jones 24 hours ago, I think you still should.
Yeah, so before we just get into the game, I do want to remind people, because this is a good transition into it. Tomorrow on the podcast with Andy Behrens, we'll be doing the People's Panic Meter. I think Daniel Jones presents a really good opportunity to promote this. What we do here on Sunday night, like Scott and I for the rest of the show, we're just going to be basically quick reaction, shooting from the hip, like living in the moment. The goal with the People's Panic Meter segment is to Andy and I will be maybe a little bit more zen, how we're feeling about everything. So if you have players that you are panicked on, even after listening to this podcast, you might be panicked on a few players. If Scott and I raise some alarm bells, you can send in emails, videos, you can send in voice memos, you can just send in regular old emails to fantasymailbag@yahoosports.com.
You can write Matt Harmon a letter in crayon. He'll read it on the air.
I will read it as long as I don't have to write it, because I've got the worst handwriting on planet Earth. So as long as it's better than my handwriting, I'll read your crayon letter right here on the podcast. But yes, so with that out of the way, we'll just we've already talked about the game a little bit, but we'll put a bow on it here. Sunday Night Football, Dallas Cowboys 40, Giants 0, 40-0. I mean, it was a fun day of football. This was like a very strange way to cap it off. And it's funny, Scott, because I don't know that I would have said that the Cowboys were going to win this game 40-0, but basically from the moment go, it felt like, oh, damn, they're going to take the Giants to the woodshed in this game. They're going to take their lunch money. They were just playing at a different speed. And to bring it back to Daniel Jones and to the Giants defense, Scott, the fact that, I talked about Daniel Jones a lot on this podcast. And I had people tweeting at me about Daniel Jones during the game. But at the same time, like, well, I hope you listened to the preview podcast where I said, like, you might not be able to play anybody against this Cowboys defense because they're about to be that good this year. And my God, Scott, they looked that good in this game.
Let's do some overreaction theater. Who's the best team in the NFC East?
I mean, it's an open question. I'm still just going to go with the Eagles because I will say I think Dak was fine in this game, but there were a couple moments where you're like, oh, all right. Like, I know you don't have to do much. I know the run game is taking this thing, 14 carries, 50 yards, 2 touchdowns for Tony Pollard. I think he looked fantastic in tight spaces. He looked every bit worth like a round 1 fantasy pick. Also caught 2 passes as well. But I still think and look, again, they didn't have to prove it to me in this game, but I still think I have less questions about the Eagles passing game ecosystem overall than I do the Dallas Cowboys. So I'm not going to overreact, and I will still say I think the Eagles are the best team in the NFC, but I do think the Cowboys are a legitimate Super Bowl contender. I felt that way going into the year, and I still feel that way.
I know we didn't see any of it tonight, but is there a slow developing Polaroid in the Giants passing game? Is there one of those receivers who you're thinking, maybe you pick them up and somebody else drops them? Who do you like most long-term in this Giants receiver room?
Oh, dude, I have no idea what to say after this game. This is the type of game, honestly, Scott, where we're going to come on this podcast. And you said it actually when I was like, all right, well, let's reconvene, at this time and let's do the recap. You were like, I don't even know what I'm going to say. I don't even know what to say to you when you asked me that question, because this is just such a brutal takedown. It's it was an embarrassment, right? It was as bad. I don't think it could get worse for the Giants than what they had to endure. I mean, Daniel Jones going back out there, you're down 40-0. His jersey's completely soaked through. It's as bleak as it's bad as it could get. And you're right, they get Arizona in week 2. So, I mean, I know it's going to feel bad, but you're going to go back to the Daniel Jones well in week 2. They have the 49ers in week 3. That's a tough draw in the first 3 weeks. You get one game against Dallas, you get another against San Francisco. But still, I don't know who I can't come away from week 1 feeling any differently about the Giants receivers because of how that game went. And so anything I said in the offseason is still kind of how I feel about this team.
I'll just close with this. We talk about teams pull back from the exhibition season. They don't want to get players hurt in August. So there are like 8 or 9 teams that didn't even play their first string quarterback in any of the exhibition games. So a lot of times week 1 becomes almost a glorified exhibition game for a lot of teams because they're finally getting people out there in actual game situations. This may be the worst game today that the Bengals play all season. It may be the worst game that the Seahawks play in a while. The Steelers, this is going to be one of the worst games they play this year. And I think you just have to write off to the Giants. And remember, they had a drive going when that first Dallas touchdown happened, right? I mean, they had 3 first downs, I think, on the first drive. So just sometimes the negative momentum kicks in, the quicksand kicks in, maybe a little panic kicks in or whatever. You start pressing, you start trying too hard to make a play, whatever it is. It's just important to remember that things go, the whirlpool principle, things go back to the middle, things regress. The Cowboys can't possibly be this good. The Giants can't possibly be this bad. At the end of the day, Dallas is probably a 12-5 team or something like that, maybe 13-4, maybe 11-6. The Giants are probably, like last year, a quasi-contender. It's just, if teams are going to really lay an egg, I think week 1's a common time for it because of the cadence of the schedule and how teams have pulled back in August.
I mean, you and I get on this podcast and we're gassed up because it's the start of the football season. The guys on the field feel that same way. So because on the flip side of what you said, when like the offense starts pressing, I mean, Collinsworth talked about this on the broadcast that late in the third quarter, when you're the Dallas defense and you're blowing these guys out, like they smell blood in the water. They smell like I can pad my stats here so that when I go to, nobody's going to remember that I had 3 sacks against, the Giants when we absolutely had them on the rope. What they're going to remember is that I had 10 sacks in the season at the end of it, right? You count it all at the end. So these guys know they can go hunting, right? They start feeling the blood in the water. The Giants feel the impact on the other side of it. It's a great reminder that it's a human game, and it's something we always try to keep on this podcast. So, I think with that, we can go on to the rest of the games here that were slightly more competitive than 40-0. So, all right. Let's move on to the other big games, our headliners here in week 1. Starting with Miami Dolphins 36 at LA Chargers 34. Scott, this was as much of a banger as we possibly could have asked for between these two teams.
Yeah, after the first wave of games was so sluggish, and we have a lot of sluggish games we're going to get to later, this game kind of cleansed your palate. My big takeaway here is just, look, there were certain slots you needed to get Tyreek Hill, but if you wanted Tua Tagovailoa, you could have had him on almost every roster. He was extremely affordable. And watching Tyreek Hill just be open this entire game, which obviously Mike McDaniel is a great offensive coach, we may never separate just how good Tua is and remove it from his environment, his ecosystem, right? His infrastructure. But it doesn't matter. These guys are always open. And if Tua stays healthy, last year we led the league in YPA, right? He had a great season. He just didn't complete it. If he can stay healthy, man, I think it's going to be a huge regret for a lot of people, me included, that, again, you didn't get the slot for Hill. That's one thing. Okay. Jalen Waddle, you had to be in a certain slot, but Tua was out there, man. And, Mostert just got a pinch in this game. It was mostly chucking the ball downfield. It was really fun game to watch. And it's sad. I was hoping for overtime just as a football fan. I wasn't even going to gain much from it fantasy wise, but Miami hired the right offensive coach. They did the right thing with two receivers nobody can cover. Their quarterback is good enough. I think they're going to be a carnival every week.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the talk going into this game, and I mentioned this on the preview podcast, that even Mike McDaniel kind of rolling his eyes at, the Brandon Staley plan, right? Like sort of having fun with reporters bringing that up, because they were really, I think, the one team that really gave this offense legitimate trouble with a game plan. If they were, and obviously we'd need to watch the coach's film to know this for sure, but if they were trying to run that game plan back this year, Miami certainly found a viable counterpunch to it. And a lot of it was, like you said, just pushing the ball downfield. They weren't necessarily trying, and Tua always is going to pick his spots over the middle of the field, but they really, again, in man coverage, just let Tyreek go to work. 11 catches, 215 yards, 2 touchdowns on 15 targets. Just pushing the ball downfield to him. Waddle had big catches, averaged over 19.5 yards per catch. Even like River Craycraft popping up in the end zone. Braxton Berrios having moments. Durham Smythe having a couple of big catches. That's another thing that struck me with this too, Scott. This offense will always be highly concentrated. Tyreek Hill, 15 targets. But if they can have other guys step up when the coverage looks are favorable, that is also a big win for Tua. I think these ancillary players, they're not guys that we're going to pick up in fantasy. They're not like having big performances or anything. Again, all these guys are between 40 and 44 yards that I just read off there. But those ancillary players stepping up, I think, matters a little bit.
I thought it hit the sweet spot where the secondary players played well enough to help the octane of the offense, but they didn't get in the way of the main appetizer. They didn't get in the way of the entrees. Hill, 15 targets. Waddle only had 5, but whatever. He'll have like 11 or 12 next week. I'm not worried about it. So I think Tua threaded the needle nicely, where he did spread the ball around a little bit, but the guys who needed to eat certainly ate. Now, let me ask you this. What do we make of Austin Eckler, our buddy? Great game. He goes over 100, gets a touchdown, is active in the passing game, which he always is. But I don't think anyone saw Joshua Kelly going 16 for 91 and a touchdown. We're at a time where there are very few bell cows. It feels like the league is littered with running back 2, running back 3, those what the heck flexes that Sigmund Bloom would call them. Can Joshua Kelly get into the what the heck flex conversation?
There were times last year, and even Austin and I talking about it on Eckler's Edge, where we were just like kind of singing the praises of Josh Kelly. And he's been very open with the fact that he wants to have that second pitch in the backfield to go along with him. Times last year, in hindsight, it was coming off the Browns game, and the Browns got steamrolled by everybody. They were really the only game that the Chargers ran the ball well last year. But I remember even coming out of that game asking that question last year, like, is Josh Kelly going to have sort of some standalone value, and of course have monster upside, or at least, some level of running back, high end 2, low end 1 upside if anything ever happened, knock on wood, to Austin Eckler. Then he got hurt last year, and that sort of threw that off track. So I do think it's possible that Kelly can carve a rollout here, because Austin has been pretty excited about him, and again is open to having that second pitch. And I thought, like, coming out of this game, or like early in the game, I was like, man, the Chargers are running the ball really well. And we talked a lot all through the offseason about, the Chargers, is there going to be an ADOT boost for Justin Herbert? 6.9 yards per attempt today. That wasn't necessarily like, he was certainly not the one operating the fireworks show. That was the guy on the other side of the field in Tua. But we haven't really talked enough about Kellen Moore bringing in a much more creative and much like a run scheme that marries well to their play action pass and their passing game scheme. So I think there is room for both of these running backs to be rather fruitful. And again, if there's any loss in pass game for Austin Eckler, we're hoping it's offset by an efficient ground game.
Let me close with two more things. I believe there are 12 lead changes in this game. That's maximum excitement for me when it just ping pongs back and forth. Again, I was sad when this game ended. And full disclosure, we get a lot of things wrong. NFL is very humbling. When the Isaiah Likely story exploded in the morning, there's a team that Frank Schwab and I co-manage. He was in Vegas at the Yahoo Sportsbook, which looks like a wonderful property, by the way. It looks
pretty cool, yeah.
Yeah, I was jealous. There's a lot of FOMO there, seeing pictures of our colleagues there. I'll have to try to get there during the season. But so I thought, well, maybe we can add Likely to this team that we co-manage. It's a 14-teamer. I was happy he was available. It's like, well, what are we going to cut? We're not cutting Jalen Warren. I have a thing for Chig Okonkwo. I'm not going to cut him. Jonathan Mingo, we both kind of like. So I dropped Joshua Kelly. So I'm going to look back the day that I dropped Joshua Kelly for the Isaiah Likely 1 catch, 4 yards game. It's the Al Capone's vault game, right? You open it up, there's nothing there. Look, it's a gross day for tight end. It was gross in the morning. It was gross during the games. That's been the ugliest position in fantasy right now. But here's the bottom line. I'm saying this to own it and to throw it out there. And yes, we've been doing this for a long time. We still do things that don't look good. But if you're afraid to make a mistake, if you're afraid to make these moves, you're playing far too conservatively. Sometimes you're just going to make a call and it's going to look, this Kelly thing looks bad now. Who knows how it'll look, 10 minutes from now or a week from now, whatever. But you can't be afraid to make moves. And sometimes you're going to drop the wrong guy. Who knows? Maybe we'll get Kelly back. But for now, it's feeling like a regretful decision.
Yeah, just something to keep in mind because this is should be a really good offensive environment. I feel good coming out of this game about both offenses. Really good about the Dolphins. I definitely think the Chargers and Brandon Staley at some point have to figure out this defense. I mean, JC Jackson, that's another thing that was worth noting too. The big game they pitched against Tua and the boys last year on Sunday Night Football, JC Jackson, their prized free agent cornerback, was not a part of it. And he was a part of this one, and it didn't go so well. So I think the Chargers have to figure out that defense. But let's move on to the next game here. I wanted to have this one high in the rundown because I spent a lot of time watching it. Jacksonville Jaguars 31, Indianapolis Colts 21. I think this one it needs to, like, this is a game you should react pretty quickly to me, right? There's always, do I overreact or do I underreact to what I watch in week 1, Scott? And this game, I think, has a lot of things that you should react quickly to. Anthony Richardson dropped back to pass 45 times. In the early window, the only guys to drop back more or in the early window, Kenny Pickett, CJ Stroud, and Kirk Cousins. Obviously, Kirk Cousins was in a little bit of a back and forth affair, and they're going to be a pass-heavy offense. The other two guys were in extreme negative game script, right? CJ Stroud and, oh my God, we'll get to the Steelers later. That was not the case with this game. Like, the Colts actually led this game until about 5 minutes. Going into the fourth quarter, they led this game 21-13. And then the Jags just broke it open with 14 points with less than 5 minutes in the game in about 90 seconds of total game time. They scored really quickly. So I was skeptical of this idea generally, but if you thought this offense was going to be super run heavy, it was not in week 1.
No. And also, I mean, to me, the big takeaway I wanted to come in here, 3 things really. How ready was Calvin Ridley to play football? Could Michael Pittman be supported in a rookie quarterback offense where the quarterback may run a lot and maybe they might want to shield him? And was anybody capable of doing something fun while Jonathan Taylor's on vacation? Well, Calvin Ridley looked fantastic, and I'm underweight on Ridley. That really hurt. Michael Pittman has a terrific game, 8 for 97, touchdown, 11 targets. He's the target hog there. He just missed a second touchdown when Minshew had to play in that final series. And Deion Johnson did absolutely nothing. When you get 13 carries for 14 yards, it's like, okay, if we picked up Deion Johnson, he was on my sleeper list. I think I'm on the DFS played him, all of that stuff. Brick. I talked about regrets of not having enough Tua. It's not that I was down on Calvin Ridley. I just felt like analysts, people I draft against were really in on Calvin Ridley.
Yeah.
He was getting pushed into the second round of some of my drafts late in the summer, and I wasn't going to play that way. And man, he looked like he had never missed any time. And not only that, he looked like he and Lawrence had been playing together for 2 or 3 years. I mean, it's just like it reminded me of Peyton Manning and Marvin Harrison, man. I mean, they were just in sync and they established it right away. And some people can say, well, of course, didn't you watch the preseason? Well, I mean, there's plenty of things that happened in the preseason that did not replicate themselves today. Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll get to that. We'll get to that later. Unfortunately, San Francisco insisted on playing their starters. I think at one point, somebody said on Twitter at one point, Pickett's like, when do we go against the second string so we can score a touchdown? But yeah, Ridley, man, look, nobody ever doubted what Calvin Ridley could be. He was a first round pick. He was an Alabama product. He was a wide receiver 4 in 2020, I want to say. I mean, he's been a star before. It's just a matter of how quickly would that come back and how quickly would he get comfortable with a new team? I guess the answer is right freaking away. And I'm underweight on Ridley, and that really hurts. With Pittman, I was just nervous that they would maybe try to hide Anthony Richardson. They didn't. Shane Steichen said, you know what? We're just going to throw haymakers at you, and we're not going to hide Richardson. Now, unfortunately, he took a hit late in this game and had to leave. It doesn't seem like it's going to be anything long-term, but he'll learn to be judicious, and you can't take some of those shots that he was taking today. But if the Colts can play games like this, if they can, support Pittman, if they can give it back and forth, because if you had told me before the game, the Jaguars are going to score 31, I'm like, well, Jacksonville, they're going to get blown out. And as you said, yeah, the Colts were leading this game into the fourth quarter. They looked like a competitive team. So I was encouraged by all that. Tank Bigsby did steal that one touchdown, but I thought ETN looked pretty good. I know his touchdown came late in the game, kind of a window dressing touchdown, but he got the 5 catches. The big thing with ETN since they drafted him, and I realize he had that 1 year loss to injury, is they haven't relied on him as a major part of the passing game. If they're going to let him catch 3 to 5 passes a week, then I actually got ETN wrong in the preseason too.
Yeah, just wrapping it up with the Jags. 5 catches would be great for ETN, but still, if he's even just going to out carry Tank Bigsby 18 to 7, that's kind of enough. I also think generally too, just on Calvin Ridley, yeah, it was immediate. 4 catches for 41 yards and a touchdown on the first drive. Like, it was just an immediate carryover from the preseason. So, and yeah, it's really, I don't think you could beat yourself up too much for not having a ton of Calvin Ridley, because if you wanted Calvin Ridley, you had to do some crazy stuff like me. And I ranked him at wide receiver 13. And he, Frank, well, by the end of it with Cooper Kupp's injury, he was wide receiver 12 for me, just because I had to keep dropping Cooper Kupp. You had to do that to get him by the end of the process, because people were that high on him. So I was one of the lunatics doing that. And just so that's kind of the state of the Jags. The Colts are not a good defense. Like, they have a very, very young secondary. So that is also worth noting here when we're talking about these Jaguar performances. But and I think you could say the same thing maybe for the Colts side of this too. But I just think coming out of this, like, I think Michael Pittman's going to outkick his ADP coming out of this. Frankly, I thought that going into it, but I think this really kind of cements that case. Because again, 45 dropbacks when the team was mostly competitive and or in control of the game. It just never squared with me, Scott, that, Shane Steichen, who I think is a sharp coach, was going to build his offensive identity around like Deion Jackson and Jake Funk and Evan Hull or even Zach Moss. Like, once the Taylor stuff happened, I think that was, if that was the plan going into the training camp, it was over once that public spat happened. And
the great thing is Jacksonville, as you said, took advantage of a poor Indianapolis defense, but their schedule is so favorable. The divisions they're matched up with, they get the NFC South, which is obviously somewhere you can make hay. They're the overwhelming favorite in their division for the 5 division games that are left, of the one of them won't be fantasy relevant. So I think Trevor Lawrence, I know Frank Schwab talked about him as a kind of a sleeper MVP candidate. I think that was justified today as well.
Next game up here, Cleveland Browns 24, Cincinnati Bengals 3. I think this has to go down as one of the more surprising results, Scott. How are we feeling about both of these teams coming out of it? Yeah,
I spent a lot of time watching this game. I'd like some of that time back. I also watched a lot of the Washington-Arizona game. I'd like a lot of that time back. I'm working on that refund. It's in processing. These are pretty simple. These are pretty clean takeaways, though. Cincinnati, it's a relaxed game. Joe Burrow, this was just a set-up spot for them, right? Burrow hardly did anything all summer. And they go to Cleveland, who has a great defense. It rains all day. Cleveland has controlled this series. They've actually played the Bengals really well, even when they haven't been great, because their defense is excellent. It's a division matchup. just forget everything you saw from the Bengals. T. Higgins had 8 targets, no catches. It's just a stone fluke. Chase was relatively held in check. I think Burrow threw for 82 yards. He obviously never looked right, but it was basically a preseason game for them. You can't take any of that seriously. And just Cleveland's defense, they have a lot of playmakers on that side of the ball. Cleveland, Nick Chubb, national treasure. Everybody loves him. No big deal there. The thing about Deshaun Watson is I thought he did not play well. And yet he ran for 45 and a touchdown. He pushed into the 20-point plateau for fantasy. He actually had a good fantasy game on a day where he didn't play great in real life. Like I remember last year before the season, I was saying that one of the great things about Jalen Hurts is he can have a bad game, maybe run in a touchdown or two and have a great fantasy game. Now, Watson isn't going to run as proactively as Hurts does, but the fact that I thought Watson didn't play well and he still scored well is gigantic for fantasy. Cooper and Moore were targeted both the same odd times. Neither one of them did that much with it. Again, we'll see how quickly Watson gets comfortable. And it was a rainy day. The game flow, it became obvious once Cleveland got a multiple score lead. They really didn't do that much. So it's like, okay, they need to do much to win. So it's okay, let's let Chubb control this game and everything. But the bottom line is it's knee jerk. A lot of people are like, oh man, Burrow's not right. And I'm scared all the Bengals. What's with T. Higgins and all that? I'd trade for any of these Cincinnati guys in a minute. And I think most people are smart enough that they're going to give them at least another game or two and try to figure out what's going on. But not at all worried about the Bengals. I'm curious what your level of confidence with Watson. I like that he ran, and I like the pieces around him. I'm just not convinced he's ever going to be a great passer again. But I mean, it's obviously too early to say that with any conviction. But what's your state of the Cleveland passing game right now?
Yeah, we don't need to talk anymore about the Bengals because we're on the same page there. They do get Baltimore in week 2. Baltimore has played them well of late with Mike McDonald back there, but they have a pretty juicy schedule going forward. So I'm with you. If anybody's dumb enough to want to trade those players, I'll be first in line to make those offers. With the Browns, I'm with you that every time I'm watching this game, and I was one of my. Hey, by the way, I just want to give a quick shout out to YouTube. I think they crushed the first Sunday ticket.
Me too. I was nervous. They were great.
Yeah, it was awesome. We had 3 screens going up here in the command center. That's what my brother-in-law is calling my my new office up here. So 3 screens going to the command center, 4 on the multicast thing, and in the early window, the Browns are one of those. This game was one of those. So I was coming into this game quite often, and I'm with you that the 2 things that still stand out with Deshaun Watson, it's pocket presence and it's ball placement. I still think his pocket presence is scattershot, and I still think his ball placement is scattershot. Those 2 things look, he played better, I think, in this game than pretty much almost at any point last year. But that's a low bar. I'm not giving you flowers for clearing that because he was 38th in EPA per 36th in EPA per dropback last year when he played. Like, we know he's going to clear that. But I'm with you that I still have major concerns about him as a player.
Yeah, I felt like his athleticism bailed out some bad decisions. Sometimes he was a beat late on a throw. As you said, the ball placement was an issue. So I think we're on the same page there. And just, you mentioned YouTube having a really good debut. Gold star to Nick Chubb. This is another guy I wanted to draft like crazy, and I just kept getting the wrong slot. It's no fun to be sitting out Nick Chubb, but you already know, dear listener, that Nick Chubb is a hell of a football player. You and I are still kind of raising an eyebrow at the Cleveland Browns, who get the Titans, the Ravens. They have they get the Steelers, the Titans, the Ravens, and then a bye week before coming back with San Francisco. Not the easiest schedule. Let's move on to the next one here. Talk about a good debut. Los Angeles Rams 30, Seahawks 13. The Seahawks started kind of losing their composure at the end of this one. DK Metcalf with a dumb penalty late in the game. I think they look frustrated. And hey, man, the Stafford and the kids look pretty good in this one. Yeah, I owe an apology to Sean McVay, who had them ready to play. And man, Puka Nacua was just hiding in plain sight. 4% rostered in Yahoo. We all knew Cup. We knew he was going to miss multiple games, and then came down a day or two ago, four game at least on IR. I don't know when he's coming back. It could be an extended absence. And so I thought maybe it's just going to be the Tyler Higbee show, but they don't have a downfield threat. I don't really like Van Jefferson that much. Tutu Atwell. I wasn't talking myself into those guys. I needed to ask myself, can Nacua play? Who's this Nacua guy? He looked great. And there's signature significance. When you put up the numbers he put up, what do you have, like 10 catches, I think, in this game?
10 catches on 15 targets.
Right. You do that right out of the box. I think there's signature significance. It's very unlikely to be a fluke. And again, he's 4% rostered in Yahoo. He's probably going to chase over 50%. It's so hard to find an impactful receiver on the waiver wire, but this could be one of those cases. Cam Akers.
I want to stick on Puka here because producer Colin said in the chat he might be the number one waiver pickup of the week, and I think at the receiver position he's probably going to be that number one waiver guy.
Sure.
So let me just give you some of my notes on him because I do have a reception perception profile on him, and I tweeted out the route chart for him in college, like his success rate, where he get like the routes he is best on, the routes he gets open on, and then the route percentage chart for Cooper Kupp last year. And your phrase hiding in plain sight sticks out perfectly there because if you look at what Puka Nacua is good at,
overlap.
It's a lot of overlap for the routes that they use Cooper Kupp on. You know, it's getting open short and intermediate, underneath, like kind of stuff, working over the middle. But much like Cooper Kupp, and this is what distinguishes Cooper Kupp, you don't need me to tell you this, but what distinguishes him between like little pop gun slot receivers is that he can sting you on outbreaking routes in the intermediate and vertical areas of the field. You know who can do that? Who showed he could do it in college? Puka Nacua, man. And he also has great hands and great yak ability. I'm not saying he's the next Cooper Kupp, but just to fill that position, there is a lot of overlap there. And I think when Cooper Kupp does come back, if he comes back, you know, within the 4 games or like after the 4 games or whatever, I still think there's probably a role for him on this team because these other guys, Van Jefferson, field stretcher, Tutu Atwell, probably a gadget guy, field stretcher type. They've always lacked that Robert Woods type of player the last couple of years. And I think even like Puka could be that type of guy too.
What was the downside of him coming? Why did he go so late in the draft?
Injuries. He's a perfect fit for the LA Rams in that case, but yeah, a lot of injuries. And you know, from BYU, not like he's not a flashy dude at all. I mean, honestly, you could say a lot of the same stuff about Cooper Kupp, right? Like middling athletic measurements, you know, not the flashiest player. He played, you know, Cooper Kupp played at Eastern Washington. Puka Nacua played at BYU, right? So I mean, he's a bit of an older prospect,
right?
Too,
they both played 4 years in college, which they hold against any receiver. Like, if you're any good, why are you staying there for 4 years?
Yeah, exactly. So, he played at multiple schools too. That's like a thing that people ding you on at this point. So, but he perfectly fits the type of guy that if somebody's gonna fall through the cracks, but be like a rock solid NFL player, I definitely think Puka fits the bill.
And again, you know, we always talk about the Steelers' ability to find receivers in the nooks and crannies in the draft. The Rams identify Cooper Kupp as an undervalued asset in the draft, and he ended up becoming a star. I still think he was the best player in football 2 years ago and should have won the MVP. And I'm not. Let's be clear what I'm not saying. I'm not comparing Puka Nacua to Kupp in a direct comp. I'm just saying that maybe it's just they've uncovered somebody. If nothing else, I'll say this. I'm going to, and this is obviously you guys season it to taste of what your needs are. I'm going to be an aggressive bidder, an aggressive offerer for Puka Nacua in my waiver wire options this week. The Cam Akers got a late touchdown this game, but Kieran Williams got the 2 earlier touchdowns. It's funny, I talk about getting Akers wrong. Before the season, I'm like, well, the Rams are going to stink, but Akers is the only show on town, and he played pretty well at the end of last year. So, okay, he's running back 23, 25, whatever. If you kind of quasi-punt running back, hero build, zero build, Cam Akers makes sense. Well, this game, the Rams actually played well, and Akers didn't have the backfield to himself. So, I mean, you know, could I have gotten that call any more wrong than I did? Akers is still the lead guy here, but Williams is a mouth to feed. Williams, and here's the thing with those short touchdowns, right? You think, well, anybody can get them. It's kind of like in baseball. Well, anybody can pitch a 9th inning with a 3-run lead. But if you get that save and everybody shakes hands, they're happy. They give you the ball again in the 9th inning. And that's kind of the way goal line works, right? If you hold on to the ball, you don't fumble, you punch it in from the goal line, people like pressing a button when it's worked before. So I think the touchdown equity for Cam Akers has to be significantly less now than it was 24 hours ago.
Yeah, 9 at one point it was 9-8 in favor of Kyren Williams with carries, you know, out of 17 total team carries. And neither of these guys were explosive. Neither of these guys busted long runs. But yeah, I'm with you. That's a huge thing that I think you have to adjust to at this point because ADP did not suggest there was going to be any sort of timeshare at all with Cam Akers. And if there is any timeshare, he's in a lot of trouble. Real quick on the Seahawks, any panic for what was a pretty flat performance from them coming to week 1, especially against one thing I kept saying with the Rams is this is a super young defense outside of Aaron Donald. But Aaron Donald but you know, outside of one of the best players that's ever played the sport, they're a young defense. But Aaron Donald was a game record multiple times in this one, which I think helped the rest of the defense.
I'm giving them a mulligan. I actually thought Seattle's offense played well for about a half, and then they didn't play at all well in the second half, and Lockett got dinged up in this game, which didn't help. But I still believe Geno Smith's legitimate. At least JSN was on the field. He didn't do a huge amount in this game, but at least he's playing. I still think this is going to be a plus offense, and I would kind of give them the Seattle pass. I'd kind of give them the Cincinnati pass, even though it was only maybe a half of a sting palm for the Seahawks.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it just, these NFC West teams always play each other like weirdly tough too.
Mm-hmm.
They get Detroit, Carolina, and then the Giants in week 4 before they go on bye in week 5. So I'm willing to give the Seahawks a mulligan too. All right, we've delayed it enough, Scott. We got to get to it here.
Mm-hmm.
San Francisco 39ers. San Francisco 49ers 30 at Pittsburgh Steelers 7. Let's save the Niners for a second and let's just get the Steelers part of it out of the way. Look, said it on the preview podcast. There's a good chance people are going to come out of this overreacting to one of these two offenses having a bad day against one of these great defenses. The Steelers had a really bad day against a really good defense in San Francisco that added pieces in the offseason to an already great unit. That being said, Kenny Pickett's stat line, 2.51 adjusted net yards per attempt, 68.4 passer rating. Scott, those tell the story of how poorly he played. And look, he was under a lot of pressure. They added Javon Hargrave to that defensive line, which was already very good last year. So he was definitely harassed. He was under duress. But I mean, he was missing layups. He was placing passes poorly that receivers needed to adjust to that shouldn't have been the case. I wasn't high on Kenny Pickett because of the preseason. I know you weren't high on Kenny Pickett because of the preseason, but I'm coming out of this like, yeah, I get it. Good defense, really bad matchup for the Steelers offense. But I mean, if you're not coming out like a little spooked, especially because Deontay Johnson gets banged up, was ruled out very quickly with the hamstring injury, and Pat Freiermuth was dealing with a chest injury, like their quarterback didn't play well, and they might have lost their best separator and best red zone weapon coming out of this one.
Yeah, a big reason why I was at least open-minded to Pickett improving this year was I thought he was very poised and quietly effective the final quarter of last season. And you said the word spooked. That's what very early in this game, Kenny Pickett, whatever good feeling he had coming into this game was gone. He looked like he was, remember the Sam Darnold seeing ghost game? That's what this looked like.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
It had the total same feel to it. Now, you have to give a lot of that credit to San Francisco because they have a great defense and they forced a lot of that stuff. But as you said, there were throws that were there and Pickett just missed them. And sometimes that happens where a quarterback gets out of sync and he loses his confidence or he loses his flow, his mojo, whatever it is, and that carries over to a course of a game. I'd like to think this is more about San Francisco's defense being great than Pittsburgh just being a lost cause. But it was frustrating that I spent all summer talking about, what part of the Pittsburgh offense am I going to draft into? And nobody played well in this game. The fact that Allen Robinson was their leading receiver tells you just about everything you need to know. Even the running game didn't go anywhere. Harris had one good run, and I think every other play that he and Warren had was a negative play, was an unsuccessful play. So everybody pretty much has to go back to square one. It's a well-coached team. Look, we're going to have to deal with the fact it's a Matt Canada offense. That's frustrating.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody thinks Canada is going to be here for a long time. And not because he's promoted to a head coach, but more like he'll probably be like a quarterback coach somewhere else or whatever, go to the CFL. But this was a tough pill to swallow because I was optimistic about Pittsburgh. Now, the good thing is, to cleanse the palate, man, San Francisco, yes. I mean, Brock Purdy looked great. Mm-hmm. And McCaffrey was McCaffrey, and Eli Mitchell. This whole idea that Eli Mitchell was going to get in McCaffrey's way, it didn't happen today, and I don't think it's going to happen much at all. But here's the thing I'm regretting, okay? So Brandon Ayuk has the big game. He has the 2 touchdown catches. He also threw a killer downfield block on the McCaffrey touchdown run. Yeah. One of my favorite plays of the day. So, okay, there's mouths to feed here. It wasn't a Kittle game, and Debo was kind of quiet. There'll be days where Debo does it and Ayuk doesn't do it. That's fine. But their projections were pretty similar, and Debo went 2 rounds earlier. And that just looks like it was a gigantic mistake, because I don't know how you can say, if you can't get to Debo being a major difference maker with that running supplement, then why is he better than Brandon Ayuk? And Scott Barrett of Fantasy Points is always making this point, and you know better than anybody because you chart all this stuff. Ayuk is such a great man beater, right? Mm-hmm. And such a great route runner. He can't, he was a first round pick. It took a while. I think he was a first round pick. It took some time for him to figure it out, to maybe even grow up into what it's like to be a pro and an NFL player and all that. He took all those leaps last year, and they talked about how his approach had gotten better, and he really thinks that really the light gone on for him. And he's their best receiver, I think. I love Debo, and they're good at different things and all that. But I'm just looking back and thinking, did I really? And I have some Ayuk shares. Again, a team I have with Frank, we have Ayuk. That was more Frank than me, so I appreciate that. While I'm screwing up the team, he's making good picks. But I think, I don't know how we let people get away with getting Brandon Ayuk 2 rounds later than Debo Samuel. I know it's one game. I know Samuel will beat him other weeks, but I think they're pretty close to the same production type of guy.
Yeah, man. Look, I mean, you're obviously preaching to the choir with Brandon Ayuk, and the thing that I'm going to write in my Care Don't Care recap piece is that I think you just got to, I think the reason that you got to throw out the previous hierarchy with this receiver core, because the reason I think that Debo went earlier than Ayuk, and I had these guys I did the hedge ranking where I had them back to back in my ranks, but I did put Brandon Ayuk 1 spot ahead. And it's for the reason that I think, Debo went earlier in drafts because he's had a better season on record. But you always say this, Scott, you want to skate to where the puck is going. And if you've been watching Brandon Ayuk run routes and, consistently get better each and every year and not see, dude, the puck is going to this guy being like a top 10 type of NFL receiver as an individual talent. And he might already be there and the stats might not show it, but, F the stats, because like watching him play in isolation is what's going to tell you the truth. That's where the puck's been going. And you're right. There's going to be games when Debo has better fantasy performances. He's not going to lead the team in targets every single week. Kittle's not going to have 3 for 19. He's going to be, I do think, unfortunately, I think Kittle's he's the guy I drafted the least of in this passing game, which is a shame because I know we both love the player. But yeah, to me, the puck is going to Ayuk taking us another step as he's consistently taken steps, and he's going to disrupt what people think about this offense.
I know NFL narratives just flip so quickly, but have you ever seen a week where more signature tight ends just kick people in the stomach?
And amazingly too, because it's like, wow, we need other people to step up beyond the name brand guys, and then the name brand guys are all the ones that really they miss this game and stuff like that. So I mean, yeah, what a disaster.
It's funny that also, Kittle did play, but teams had pulled back so much from preseason, and yet guys weren't playing anyway. And it felt like there was a lot of injury news to go through in week 1. Week 1 is supposed to be when your roster is pristinely healthy, and that wasn't the case this week. But it's football. You just wait 15 minutes, and we'll have new things to worry about.
All right. Well, we don't have to worry. We got to take a break before we do any more worrying here, Scott. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll recap the rest of the games from week 1. All right, moving on here to the everyone else category. Tampa Bay Buccaneers 30, Minnesota Vikings 17. Scott, do we owe Baker Mayfield an apology?
Maybe. It's not that Tampa Bay was great in this game, but all we're asking Baker Mayfield to do is be competitive enough to not sink Mike Evans, to not sink Chris Godwin. I think a lot of us in the industry, me included, we're trying to think, okay, is Mike Evans, can we get him on the Chiefs? Can we get him on the Lions? He's needed elsewhere, right? Tampa Bay's going nowhere. Well, he's in the end zone, upset the Vikings, and Baker was competitive. I thought he gave them a chance. It was just nice to see Baker Mayfield play well because he's had such a bad run out the last couple of years. Even though Tampa Bay was in a competitive game that they ultimately won, I was not at all impressed with Rashid White. He looked really jaggy to me. Yeah. I thought a couple times he made the wrong decision on cuts. There are a couple of plays. Sometimes plays are blocked to get 3 yards, but get those 3 yards, you know. And I feel like he left stuff on the table. Maybe it's just going to be that. But and then you look at Minnesota, right? Look, Jefferson's great. We don't need to talk about him. You drafted him first. He justified it. Sometimes I wonder if Kirk Cousins is just good enough to lose with. I realized they went 13-4 last year, but this is a game you have to beat Tampa Bay in this game at home, and they somehow didn't do it. The TJ Hawkinson special, 1 million catch, all the catches, none of the yards, right? That's all he did last year when he went to Minnesota. He got peppered, and he averaged like 8 or 9 yards a catch. And I didn't think Madison played well either. He bailed out with that touchdown, but I don't think he played particularly well. And Madison I gave him the Gabe Davis Award for the most polarizing player in the preseason. And it's one of those things where it's like, I think the pro Madison people can be like, well, he's still their guy. He still got in the end zone. Those points count. And the negative people are going to be like, oh, well, eventually it's going to be Ty Chandler, or maybe they'll bring Kareem Hunt back in for another workout, or, they're going to realize he's not good enough. Did your opinion of Madison get swayed by this? And you think it's okay for Mike Evans managers to kind of come out of the woodwork and say, yeah, I took him. Yeah, I knew Baker Mayfield would be good enough.
Yeah, I mean, I still am very skeptical about the just about the Bucs operation in general. I'm very skeptical about Baker Mayfield. I'm with you. I wouldn't say Baker played extremely well in this game. 21 of 34 for 173 yards and 2 touchdowns. It doesn't necessarily scream like, oh man, but he's got some. I'm not the biggest Baker fan in the world, but he's got some moxie, and he's got like I think he is. he thinks he's got too much of a playmaker gene. So I remain very skeptical overall about the Baker Mayfield experience. This is a defense that's totally going under transition too. So I think there's going to be some rocky moments. But
let me say this. Pardon me for 1 second. It's not so much that I even want Baker Mayfield necessarily to be good. I just want him to do a little bit of that Jameis Winston thing where he's just going to throw the YOLO balls to Evans, and to Godwin. And if he throws some balls to the other guys, so be it. I just want him to be aggressive enough and good enough that he doesn't sink his 2 signature receivers. And I was not confident of that in the preseason. I did not draft Mike Evans very much, if at all. And now I'm wondering if maybe Mike Evans can withstand this.
Yeah, I do think that it's possible, because I think these 2 guys are very good players. Mm-hmm. And yeah, just putting the bow on the Vikings stuff. Box score looks about what you'd expect. Jordan Addison gets a nice big play down the field in a favorable coverage look. Justin Jefferson is Justin Jefferson. TJ Hawkinson catches 8 passes. And I think Madison, I was a centrist on Madison. I generally liked him, right? But we'll see. I'm with you that I think he was a polarizing player, and people are going to take a victory lap on both sides, I think, on this one. So I'll come down somewhere in the middle. Let's move on to the next game here. Green Bay Packers 38, Chicago Bears 20. I love your note on this, Scott. This spread was adorable. When don't the Packers beat the Bears?
Yeah, the other Schwab special, he bet the Packers like months ago, and he was pounding the table for this. Yep, they were in my darts, and I took them out at the last second, and for, I'm sure, some lousy pick that lost. But there's a thing called, are you familiar with the Ewing theory?
I am familiar. Yep.
Yeah, well, could there be Ewing theory with Aaron Rodgers? A great player, Hall of Famer, walk-in guy. And I'm really looking forward to watching him play tomorrow night. That Jets-Bills game is going to be fascinating. Absolutely. Plus, we all think Garrett Wilson's going to the moon. If he's going to the moon, it's going to be on the Aaron Rodgers rocket ship. But I don't think there's that many Packers who are going to miss Aaron Rodgers. I think they're like, yeah, the guy was great, and he was a pain in the behind, and it was time to move on, and let's see if Jordan Love can play. Now, this is not the 1985 Bears. Okay, but Jordan Love, man, he made good decisions. He was accurate. It helped that he was playing from hitters' counts, and the game flow went his way. But on a day where Dobbs was supposed to be compromised, he played well. They didn't have Christian Watson. Jones got hurt seemed to get dinged up after one of his long touchdown runs. I'm underweight on Aaron Jones, and that kind of stung today. I think Jordan Love has a chance. Again, it's one game. You don't want to over extrapolate. The thing that's so hard, people say, well, don't jump to conclusions after 1 week. All we're doing all season is speculating and talking about, analyzing and crunching. And then we watch these preseason games where nobody plays, or they play for like 2 seconds. And so we finally see real games, and you want to find meaning in it, and you want to extrapolate, and you want to beat people to the punch on stuff. And every year there'll be crazy things, kooky things that happen that look totally wrong out of context when you look back at them. And maybe Jordan Love's really good game in week 1 will be one of those things. But I'm impressed. He goes to a hostile environment, divisional game, and he played, he played the type of game they need him to play. They don't need him to be a Pro Bowler. They don't need him to be a pass first quarterback or anything like that. They need him to be competent. And LaFleur's a hell of a coach, man. The idea that somehow the betting market took the Packers and the Bears, who were nowhere near each other last year, and said, yeah, they're about even this year. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, so number one, the one thing you said there is so true about like the reaction and people wanting to be hesitant about reacting, right? And all of that stuff, because we don't want to overreact to week 1. But there's only 17 data points here, so one is significant. Like, and getting that right. Here's a great example. I was just one that's on the top of my head because we just talked about Cooper Kupp earlier. But remember, after week 1 of the 2021 NFL season, the Rams beat the Bears 34-14. Cooper Kupp has 7 catches for 108 yards and a touchdown. Robert Woods, who was going ahead of him in just about every draft after Matthew Stafford got there, has 3 catches for 27 yards and a touchdown. I think people probably were still people held to their priors that Robert Woods was going to be the guy for 3 weeks into the season. And then by week 4, it's too late. It's too late because everybody knows now what you know. So if you were able to react quickly to these situations, another great example was the Cowboys when DeMarco Murray was there and they were supposed to have this garbage defense and they were never going to be in positive game scripts. And then they were in positive game scripts because the defense was good. And then DeMarco Murray had this incredible fantasy season. And if you could jump on those things early, you can find value. I do wonder if Jordan Love is one of those things. 3 touchdowns in this game. He doesn't have his top weapon either. I mean, Aaron Jones might be the top weapon on this team. He has 2 catches for 86 yards and a touchdown. He had a couple dynamic plays as a receiver. They didn't do anything special on the ground. AJ Dillon 13 carries for 19 yards. But yeah, I mean, look, I buy what you're saying about the Aaron Rodgers Ewing effect, not because he's washed or he's bad or anything like that, but I mean, imagine if you were on the Packers and you got to deal with the Rodgers stuff all the time. I mean, it's exhausting, and to the point that it's okay, they all seemed really gassed up. Even the defensive players were hyping up Jordan Love in practice. So yeah, why can't Jordan Love kind of take this thing and go with it?
I'm starting to wonder if AJ Dillon's just a guy, and how does DJ Moore get 2 targets in a game where Chicago's basically in garbage time for the whole second half?
That's tough, man. That's really tough. If you're a DJ Moore backer, I don't think I drafted very much at all of DJ Moore.
Me neither.
Darnell Mooney, who's a pretty good player, 4 catches, 53 yards, team high. He gets a touchdown. I think you gotta. That was definitely another takeaway on the other side of it was if you were hoping for a big reveal of Justin Fields taking that leap in his next NFL season, you didn't get it. You didn't get it in this one. And maybe it will happen in the future, but it did not happen in this one.
I saw a couple of scrambles that I liked. A couple of scrambles I liked from Fields today, but I didn't see any throws that impressed me. I didn't see the whole game, and I'll watch it all tomorrow. But I was just I just want to see a couple of dimes, to Moore or whoever. I wanted to see something, and I didn't see it.
DJ Moore had a couple of nice moments when he got the ball twice. I mean, literally a couple of moments. So, there we go. All right, let's move on to the next one here. Philadelphia Eagles 25, New England Patriots 20. Scott, the Patriots hung around. They made this one tough on the Philadelphia Eagles, but did we learn anything coming out of this one?
Frustrated game from Patriot fan perspective because New England had a major edge in yardage, and I thought they actually defended Hurts very well. Hurts played about as poorly as you'll ever see him play, and still Philadelphia gets the win and they get the cover. It helped that they had that long defensive touchdown, the Slay run back, but I don't know. I don't want to. Philadelphia's just so talented. I mean, I always feel like AJ Brown's ready for a splash play. I know he lost one on a challenge where he barely missed getting his second foot in bounds, but it was interesting. Philadelphia, they scratch Penny. Right. They come out with Gainwell. I mean, it's so hard to figure out the backfield usage for them sometimes. I thought New England, they play a lot of man, as we know. And I think they spied Hurts for some of this game. I think this may go down as the worst game Hurts plays all year. And still they win anyway because of how deep this roster is. And it's just funny, even though New England had the edge in yardage and first downs and everything, I had no confidence that Mac Jones was going to lead them to anything down at the end of the game. And ultimately he didn't. Hunter Henry played pretty well. I feel like I was underweight on him, but mostly this was a game that frustrated me.
Yeah, Eagles passing game, it's whatever. There will be bigger games ahead. DeAndre Swift, though, 1 catch for 0 yards on 2 targets, 1 carry for 3 yards. By the end of the summer, I was like, oh man, I'm a little nervous. I'm too underweight on DeAndre Swift. I'm not feeling that way after week 1, so we'll see. That backfield, I think, will be a moving target. But on the Patriots, Ramondre Stevenson gets 6 catches for 64 yards. That's great to see. I do remain really interested in Kendrick Bourne, who I think is a good player. who was kind of unfairly thrown aside by the last coaching staff, which the last offensive coaching staff, by the way, the last offensive coaching staff was Matt Patricia. Don't really care what he thinks. 6 catches, 2 touchdowns, 11 targets. I think he's somebody to keep an eye on because while Juju is like a solid player, I think, Bourne probably gives him the most juice from a receiver position at this point. That's not saying a ton, the other guys on the roster, but he is somebody I'm not going out of my way to like empty the clip from a fab perspective on Kendrick Bourne, but he's somebody I'll at least be interested in.
I mean, hey, you can't ignore 6 catches, 2 touchdowns, and 11, mostly the 11 targets. And I thought he made a hell of a catch on the second one. So he was a player I liked a few years ago, and then he was just so ordinary for such a long time in New England that I just kind of decided, okay, the cheese has gone bad. Your career arcs, once career arcs go in the wrong direction, it's so rare where guys pick it up again. But the ball has to go somewhere. I mean, they're going to throw 500 passes to somebody. So I guess I have to be proactive to that. And again, I mentioned Henry in passing, but on a day where it was just a tight end dead zone, right? Gesicki did not have a great preseason. He actually caught 3 passes in this game, but Hunter Henry played a full season last year. And, Mac Jones, here's the thing with Mac Jones, right? It's going to always look weird that he was a first-round pick because I don't think anybody ever thinks he's going to be a star or he has a ceiling. But he was set up to fail by this coaching staff last year. If he can get competent coaching, if O'Brien is the adult in the room that we think he is, then maybe it's not a case of I talked about Baker Mayfield. It's not like I care about Baker Mayfield for fantasy. I care about Mike Evans. I don't care about Mac Jones for fantasy. But in a year where tight end might be skank, I would love to put Hunter Henry in the top 12 if I could. And at least this game showed that he has the potential to be there. We always liked him on the Chargers, right? And there's always a case of, if he could stay healthy. And then last year he stayed healthy, but he was on a team that was such a rudderless ship that didn't matter, that there was nothing to be gleaned there. This team should throw for 23, 24 touchdown passes. Why can't Hunter Henry catch 7 or 8 of those?
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. All right, next game up here. New Orleans Saints 16, Tennessee Titans 15. This game went about exactly as I thought. A little bit of a slobber knocker between two defenses that I think could be really solid and 2 teams that want to like run the ball. Chris Olave was awesome in this game. Rashid Shaheed was awesome in this game.
He was.
Dude, he can freaking play. Like I really want to hammer that home that I know Michael Thomas is there, 5 catches, 61 yards, 8 targets. That's great, but Olave is the gravitational center force of this offense, and I think Shaheed is somebody to really pay attention to. I mean, I hate that he's wearing 22, but he's a pretty good wide receiver.
I feel that way too, although I just don't know how many players this offense can support. Olave is obviously a god. Eventually, they'll get Kamara back. Maybe Michael Thomas has something left. I did not draft him at all proactive. I don't think I drafted him at all, period. So I just don't know. Shaheed is the case of I think he may need somebody to get hurt there. It's funny this game was 16-15 because I think both coaches probably went in this game like, okay, let's try to steal this game 16-15. And the Saints did that. Again, a nod to our man Schwab, who was frustrated. I think he had a Saints ticket, and Mike Vrabel played for the cover late in this game. He went for the field goal and then hoped to get the ball back, which of course they didn't. And it looked like maybe it seemed like a spot where you should have gone for it on 4th down. Man, Tannehill was under duress this whole game. And,
God, yes.
Again, I'm just trying to tell myself a story. I'm an Okonkwo guy, and I have some Traylon Burks shares, and we'd like to think that maybe there's another year of relevance left with Derrick Henry. We know the Titans' offensive line isn't very good, but every time I looked up in this game, I saw Ryan Tannehill just 3 guys around him. It looked like he was just about to get Malachi crunched. It was really hard to watch, and I wanted to believe Tennessee. Not that I thought Tennessee was like some great team, but their collapse last year coincided with Tannehill being hurt. And even when your offensive line stinks, a veteran quarterback can mask a lot of that with the right calls and getting rid of the ball and putting it where it needs to go and everything. So I thought maybe Tannehill could mask some of that. And again, not that I thought they'd come in here and shoot the game out or anything. Again, I think we all thought this would be a low-scoring game, but the Tennessee passing game was even uglier than I expected.
How about in the run game? What do you think about the fact that Tajay Spears, the rookie running back, played 34 snaps to Derrick Henry's 30? By the way, at the half, they played the same amount of snaps. So it was not as if this happened late or anything like that.
That's a thing. I mean, it's always been Henry. Even games that have salted away, they'd still run Henry into the ground. And it seems like they're finally ready to say, okay, we need to have a second pitch. You can't just throw 103 fastballs. So this could be the year. It's a 70-30 or a 65-35. I think that's totally in play.
And it could be good for Henry long term, keep him a little fresher, and it could be really bad for your fantasy team. Next one up here, Baltimore Ravens 25, Houston Texans 9. Scott, Lamar Jackson throws no touchdowns in this game because the running backs ate them all. And I'll tell you this, I come out of this game feeling pretty good about the Baltimore pass game. But obviously the big story here is in the running back position where JK Dobbins suffered a torn Achilles. I mean, just what an awful run of injuries for this guy who looks like such a good player and was off to like a dominating the backfield type of start here. But unfortunately, he's going to miss the rest of the season. We know Achilles is a tough injury for the running back position generally. It was not Gus Edwards, but it was Justice Hill who banged in 2 touchdowns and kind of looked like the first guy off the bench.
Right. Yeah. The Justice Hill is still in the league. Yes, he is. Justice Hill is in the end zone. Everybody was ruining the year they liked Justice Hill, and he didn't do anything for you, but he did it today when it helped.
Everybody's had a year.
Absolutely nobody. I feel horrible for JK. Gets back, gets hurt right when it starts because this is an offense we want to invest in. I didn't think Jackson had a great game, but whatever. What do you need to do against the Houston Texans? And as producer Colin points out, 25-9 is the scoregami. It's a unique score, the over 1,076 unique scores in NFL history, and this is one of them. Also a unique game for Isaiah Likely, who was ballyhooed. We spent a whole morning talking about him. He gets one catch for 4 yards.
Was there ever a more red flaggy fantasy trap potential than Isaiah Likely? I don't know.
I mentioned picking him up earlier. I think there's a little bit of FOMO. Like if Likely does something, I want to be in on it. I had him at tight end 10, so people. Big deal. I think every question people ask me about Likely, I think I pointed to the other guy. I'm not confident any of the other guys did anything either. It's not like Tyler Higbee broke football today, but I was less on the some people were pounding the table. People are saying, "Oh, I picked up Likely to block him from an opponent." I mean, I wasn't doing that, but whatever. I'm not. I had him a tight end 10, so that doesn't look good either. I gotta own that. Big thing here. Okay, I know Beckham did his thing. He only makes 2 catches, but one of them was a highlight film catch, and they're going to replay it over and over again. Don't miss the signal here that Zay Flowers looked fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
He could be their alpha man. He's really, and again, this when somebody does this right out of the box as a rookie, and I know there's no guarantee that Zay Flowers will be relevant 3 or 4 weeks from now, but I think there's signature significance to somebody who's this good right away when they make their NFL debut. So you can't pick up Flowers in any competitive league. Where were you on Flowers before the season?
I love Flowers, dude. I think he should not have gone this late. He was the 4th drafted of the 4th, the guys in the first round. I believe he was the last one.
Right.
I loved him. I liked him better than Jordan Addison, liked him better than Quentin Johnston. He's just right. I mean, he's behind Jackson Smith and Jigba to me, but that was no shade at Zay Flowers. Just thought JSN was a bit cleaner of a prospect. I mean, he legitimately had Antonio Brown kind of moves to him. I had more of a Deontay Johnson comparison for him where because of the route running, but he can make some boneheaded plays, but he's so much more explosive than Deontay Johnson in the open field. That's the thing where the comparison sort of falls apart. And you see it in this game, man. I mean, they were getting him the ball in space. Him and Beckham were the top 2 guys, which I think was to be expected because Bateman was working back from an injury. I want to see, in a couple of weeks if Bateman's still a part-time player. I kind of tend to doubt it, but Bengals, Colts, Browns, Steelers, Titans next. I mean, I'm with you that I think being aggressive on Zay Flowers is the way to go here because I think he is a really, really, really strong talent who is a perfect fit really in what this offense wants to do, which is spread the ball, create space. And who's really damn good at both creating space and making something out of that space when he's in it is Zay Flowers.
I mean, to bury the lead here. So Dobbins gets hurt. What do we do in this backfield? I think it's possible that neither Hill or Edwards is really a right answer. And I would think Baltimore's going to bring people in, right? There's a couple of big name guys, but there's always interesting.
They have Melvin Gordon on the practice squad.
Right. I guess I say they could promote somebody in the practice squad. I was trying to remember who was on it. Melvin Gordon, who's been around, seen some things. Fred Zinke, our colleague at Yahoo, has a fab strategy. It's more of a fantasy baseball strategy, but sometimes it applies to fantasy football. When he makes his baseball offers for fab, he tries to come in second or come in third. He tries not to win. He makes a competitive offer that he doesn't think is going to win. And if he wins, okay, he got the offer that he wanted. He got to name his price. And if he doesn't end up being the person who wins, it's okay, whatever. I'm not I'm trying to keep my resources in line so I can get more bites at the apple. That's how I'm going to approach Hill, and Edwards is rostered in a lot of leagues, but when he's not rostered, again, you have to season this to taste. Maybe if you're the person who lost Dobbins, you may be more desperate than some other teams are. But I'll make some kind of a quasi-competitive offer for these guys, but I'm not going to pound the table. I'm not going to two-hand shove for them. I think it's entirely possible both of them are kind of an empty doorway.
I think that Justice Hill is probably the guy I would lean to if you're picking up, but I think that's perfect. I'm not going to go all out to make sure I get Justice Hill. There has just been a steady drumbeat out of camp that they really like the way he's played and they like the way he fits in this offense, potentially more than Gus Edwards, who probably fit the old offense better. But I think this is going to be a passing team, and I think that will be the case when they don't play the Houston Texans. Anything on those Texans? I mean, Dameon Pierce, predictably, you should have hammered the under on his rushing yards. It was not going to be a good performance for Dameon Pierce in week 1. I'm not panicking on Pierce at all. Nico Collins gets 6 for 80 on 11 targets. Robert Woods gets 10 targets because he's just going to be that reliable underneath guy. But there will be better days for the Houston Texans. I do think CJ Stroud acquitted himself pretty well. I mean, he didn't, obviously, this wasn't a game they were pushing the Ravens to win or anything, but I think he played pretty well in a very hostile opening game.
The problem I always had with Pierce is that because he seemed to get a swell of draft support as August moved along, and a team that's going to probably win 4 or 5 games, it's just hard for me to get behind one of those running backs, unless I think they're special as a receiver. And Pierce, I think, is a below average receiver. Their defense, actually, I give them credit for not getting even though they only put up 9 points, they didn't get their doors blown off at Baltimore, which can be an intimidating spot. And all I'm really asking for Stroud is, can you support 1 or 2 fantasy receivers, right? I don't even care if it's Collins or Woods, although I'd be much better off if it's Collins because I have him rostered and Woods is at an age I don't want to roster him. But if he can just push Nico Collins to wide receiver 33, I'd be like, hey, you had a great season, man. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's what I need you for. And I think D'Amico Ryans is a great hire. It's going to take a while to get this defensive culture and scheme to gel, but I think Houston, a good time to play them is right now. I think they'll be a much more competitive team in the second half of the year.
From the second overall pick to the first overall pick, Falcons 24, Carolina Panthers 10. The Falcons are the bigger story here. So the Panthers are what we thought they were. I mean, Hayden Hurst is going to get some production. Yeah, revenge. That's true. It is a revenge game. He was predictably going to have a little nice moment with Adam Thielen banged up. The receivers are nothing. This offense is just... It's slow, man. It's slow, and this has not got a lot of pop. Miles Sanders gets 18 carries and 4 catches, 6 targets. I think that's going to remain his role. So I don't know if you have anything to add on the Panthers, but I feel like they are what we thought they were. Falcons, though, maybe they were what some people thought they were, where they were kind of in control of this game throughout. And, Tyler Algier, he had more carries than Bijan Robinson. He's going to have a role. I think he potentially is the perfect type of back where he has standalone value, maybe even just flex appeal, not even what the heck flex appeal. But then Bijan Robinson, if anything ever happened to him, Tyler Algier obviously would go to the moon. Drake London has no catches. I know that's tilting. Kyle Pitts has, 2 for 44. That will not be the case every single week, especially when they play better teams. I mean, this Panthers team is just, their defense is fine, but they're just never going to force anybody out of their shell.
Yeah, it's their problem. Atlanta realized they had this game. Remember, Ritter still has very little NFL experience. So once they realized they could just kind of grind it out, and Algier's a really good player.
Yeah.
Arthur Smith, look, I'm torn on Arthur Smith because he schemes a good running game, and he realizes both the importance of getting a guy like Bijan Robinson, who's quote unquote generational, but also Tyler Algier having a role in this offense, and maybe it can be close to 50-50. And that could be a little tilting, and maybe Robinson's going to be more like a second-round player than the first-round player he was drafted as. But I'll admit, you kind of shrugged it off, and I'm glad you're doing this because I need a little bit of therapy here. As draft season went along, I just started to think, and I remember seeing Drake London at USC, and they've had a lot of really good receivers. And I'm always talking with Michael Lazarus, our colleague who's a USC guy, and about how that great history of all the different wideouts, Steve Smith and Keyshawn Johnson, and all the different guys, Mike Williams. And Drake London was really good at the end of last year. And I was just, and I know that production and growth isn't always linear, but I was seeing as okay, He took that step up last year. It was kind of muted because it was an offense people were, didn't want to watch, and Arthur Smith was driving us crazy, and Kyle Pitts never scores touchdowns and all that. I got more and more into Drake London as draft season went along. I started to get him, and I don't mind quiet games. It's just hard to look at the zeros. And I know I said T. Higgins, don't worry about it. And I'm not worrying about it. But T. Higgins has been in the league for a while. And T. Higgins is on a team that's going to prioritize T. Higgins. At least his bagel came on 8 freaking targets. What did London have? I think London had 1 target, was it?
1, yep. 46 snaps.
And they threw 18 passes. And there's going to be a lot of games. I was hoping part of my pro London stance was like, well, they can't be this run heavy again, can they? Maybe they can. I'm nervous. I need some help here. I'm not going to panic. I'm not going to certainly not cut him. I'm not going to trade him for 70 cents or anything like that. But I'm afraid that maybe I get over my skis with Drake London at the end of draft season.
Very possible that I got over the skis on mine, or over the skis on him as well, because I'm a big fan of the player, and I was with you that I really liked him. I just think they're not going to play this way every single week, and maybe I'm not reacting enough to what I'm seeing, but I think that it's so hard to look at the zero. I'm with you, but they play the Packers, who are a better team right now than the Carolina Panthers next week. They play the Detroit Lions, who are a really good team, in week 3. They play the Jaguars in week 4. Like, let's see if they're forced out of their shell by any of those teams who look much more capable of putting up points than the Carolina Panthers do right now before I'm going to freak out about Drake London.
Let me say this, though. It's not the 0 to me. It's the 1.
Yeah, the 1 target, yeah.
The 1 is what bothers me, because the 0 can happen. Just, it's I don't know how we can ever have a game where basically Drake London wasn't there. That frustrates me.
Yep. Now, look, I totally admit that I might be in take clock and I might be underreacting, but that's just my perspective on it right now. So this is a great spot where the listener decide where you fall on the range there, because I think Scott's on one side of it, I'm on one side of it, and
I'm just nervous. I'm not going to react to it. I'm just going to sit
but look,
on my hands.
I'm nervous too.
I'm not going to trade him. I'm not. And when somebody comes with a low ball offer, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to be like, no, I'm stubborn. But you know what? A lot of people have been stubborn for Kyle Pitts for two plus years, and that's helped nobody to this point. I mean, he had a lot of yards his rookie year, and a rookie tight end who produces is a good thing. But there's been stuff left on the table for Kyle Pitts' entire career. And I'm just wondering, maybe it's just a coach who would better get these guys unlocked. I think it's a fair question to ask.
Yeah. I just like Arthur Smith's offense a lot. And like people tweeting at me in the middle of the game, like, you still think Arthur Smith's a good coach? I'm like, he's winning this game, and like his run game is awesome. So, I mean, I get it.
I mean, congratulations. You just beat the Carolina Panthers in their rookie quarterback's first game with absolutely no downfield help. I'll throw you a parade for that on Monday.
Let's move on to the next game here. Raiders 17, Broncos 16. I don't come away from this game impressed with either offense. I'll say that. I will note just what an awesome game from Jakobi Meyers. Unfortunately, before suffering a really massive, scary hit late in the game, left the game. He was able to walk off, which was, kind of surprising and good to see. But man, he was awesome in this game, and kind of looking like a guy that was a totally forgotten about late round player, but such a good player and a really good fit in this offense. But that was my only note, man, because honestly, again, I didn't come away like impressed with anybody in this one.
Yeah, that Myers was the most impressive player to me, based on my preseason expectations of what they did here. The Denver passing game was frustrating. I thought Williams and Perine were actually effective as runners. Williams, I thought, had a pretty good success rate from my eyeball. I'll have to see what the stats say and what the tape says. But for somebody who wasn't overly optimistic with Williams in draft season, it was encouraging to me. But Myers, when I first saw the hit, I was afraid, oh my God, he's neck injury, he's going to be out for the season or something like that. Just to see him walk off the field was encouraging. I think he could be an 85 catch, 980 yard, 7 to 9 touchdown guy. He for one thing, what he's good at, McDaniels is good at scheming, and the throws that Garoppolo is good at identifying, right? I mean, there's a good intersection of what does our quarterback do well, who fits, what receiver fits that type of skill set, and how can we get him here to our, plus he's got familiarity, Myers does with McDaniels. So I think Jakobi Meyers has a chance he was probably drafted after the top 40 receivers. I think he could easily be a playable wide receiver 3 if healthy going forward.
Love the player, so I'll rubber stamp that one. All right, let's move on to the last game here. Washington Commanders 20, Arizona Cardinals 16. I mean, Scott, you you were just dialed in on this game. You were taking notes. You had the you had the magnifying glass. So tell us, what did you see by the Commanders almost giving that damn thing back to the Arizona Cardinals here?
Yeah, just dialed in, and all I got on it was hung up on. Washington won the game, so my survivor sheets survived, but they did not play well. And look, I think Arizona's who we thought they were. They got 7 of their points were a gift touchdown where Howell was running around like a chicken with his head cut off and turned the ball over and just gifted Arizona a touchdown, which made me want to throw up. But here's what really frustrated me. Howell took 6 sacks in this game. He looked skittish. He looked like a guy who hasn't played a lot of NFL football, so that's part of it. But again, it wasn't so much that, I mean, look, I was super flex or deeper leagues, whatever. Howell was okay. But mostly I wanted him to push Terry McLaurin to a good year. Jahan Dotson I talked about all summer, and he was a priority pick for me. Drafted him as your 4th receiver. He might be your 3rd receiver. He might be their best receiver. Had a prop on Dotson. He only needed to go over 43 yards. He had like 30 yards as soon as the game started. Second half, when Howell was not playing well again, he took 6 sacks in this game. Threw 1 pick. They dropped at least 1 or 2 other picks. They just said, we're going to win this game with defense and running the ball up the middle. And they basically unplugged Howell. They weren't going to take any more chances with him. And that makes me think that maybe I overdrafted Dotson. Maybe I overdrafted Robinson. Maybe I even overdrafted Howell in the Superflex deeper leagues that I have him in. And this schedule, man, I mean, you just played Arizona. Right. That's the worst team you're going to play. That's why you played them in Survivor maybe this week, because this is the one time to do it, right? They get Denver, Buffalo, Philadelphia the next 3 weeks. So if Sam Howell looks skittish against Arizona, how's he going to look against some of those teams?
100% fair. You can't be feeling great about Sam Howell after this one. I mean, look, it's one start. It's fine. But the a little bit too quick internal clock, that was a problem. And like you said, the schedule coming up here, they go to Denver, the Buffalo, Philadelphia. I mean, this is not going to be any easier that going forward. So yeah, I think I'm in wait and see mode with Sam Howell after this one. Like, there were some nice moments. You know, he can move around a little bit. He can create, which is good to see. But for sure, I'm a little like raising my eyebrows at this one too, wondering. He also got banged up at one point as well. And then the Cardinals, man, they're again they are who we thought they were a team. I got nothing on the Cardinals. What you thought about Arizona 24 hours ago will stand today. All right, well, Scott, that is going to do it. A nice little beefy recap here coming out of week 1. It just felt so great for football to be back and having all the screens on and everything. I hope you enjoyed your week 1, Scott, and I hope everybody else out there did as well. For sure. And I'm going to try to trim these down going further weeks. No, don't. Hey, this was good. This was good. There's a lot to talk about. Hey, you know what? Here's the thing. We're going crazy all summer. We don't even get preseason games anymore because nobody plays. So just to get everything, you mentioned YouTube was great. It was just so exciting to watch a bunch of different stuff at the same time, and some you'll see a bunch of teams in the red zone at the same time, touchdowns, ping, 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 defensive touchdown. Even when football isn't great, because the first window wasn't great, it's still such a fantastic day, and I'm just thrilled I get to talk about it with you, and I get to do this stuff for Yahoo, because where else would you rather be on a Sunday? Literally nowhere else. Hell of a show. That's going to do it. Reminder. Tomorrow, I will be on Tuesday. Andy Behrens and I are going to debut the regular season version of the People's Panic Meter. Like I said at the top, if you want to get your submission in, fantasy mailbag at yahoosports.com. Send us a voice memo, videos. Those go to the top of the line. What are you panicked on? Who's got you panicked after week 1? Let us hear about Drake London. Let us hear about Dameon Pierce. We will decide after feeling, after feeling it out a little bit, maybe have a little more zen. I really appreciated the YouTube. If the stream was gone, they had like the zen stuff. That was great. I'm feeling a little more zen after, decompressing a bit off Sunday. So People's Panic Meter, fantasy mailbag at yahoosports.com. Send in your best submissions, video, audio. They can just be regular old emails as well. I also will have the tweets from the tweet I'm sending out. Feels good. I'll see you all tomorrow. Until then, we're out.